Dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 27th of September. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. First of all, I would like to say that the referendums have ended, and the people of the south of Ukraine made their choice. And for now, it doesn't matter how to calculate their voices, but anyway, according to the Russian sources, they have made their choice. And by the beginning of this video, we have already received the first numbers from these areas, and we can say that more than 96% in each region voted for joining the Russian Federation. If we're talking about Russian Parliament, there is no update from Russian Parliament that they're going to make some extra meeting to adopt necessary laws, because as we know, as I understand, this evening or tomorrow in the morning we're going to receive the final numbers about the result of the votings. I believe that tomorrow, somewhere at noontime, the presidents or the heads of these regions are going to make some letter, official letter to the Russian Parliament. After that, the Russian Parliament are going to adopt some laws, and after that, these territories will become a part of Russian Federation. According to the schedule I have, the next meeting of Russian Parliament should be done on the 4th of October. So if they are not planning to do an extra meeting because of these referendums, these territories are going to become part of Russian Federation not earlier than 4th of October. So there are still a lot of days before that date. But anyway, some Russian sources are saying that the Russians will do the extra meeting in parliament, but for now there is no updates on the official website or something like this. Now let's talk about one of the most important area in Ukraine, and we're going to discuss Liman bridgehead. According to the Western sources map, there are no updates since yesterday. As you can see, everything as it was. No updates, no problems, just one flag that Ukrainians got control over Kupiansk-Uzlovoy. This is the railroad station on the south from the town Kupiansk. As you can see, there are no more updates, but the situation is not like that. According to the Russian sources, the Ukrainians managed to achieve a lot of success. Not so much as they managed to achieve the day before, but anyway, now we can say that their position, they managed to develop some position. Today we got some video confirmation that Ukrainians got control over this town, Pitski-Radkovsky, this one. Furthermore, according to the Western sources map, the Ukrainians controlled just Redkadub, but from the Russian sources we know that Ukrainians also control small town on the south by the name of Novaya, this one. So let's update this map just for better understanding. And that's it. So this is the situation on this part of the front line. If we are talking about Shandrigalova, today we got a report from the Russian sources that they managed to return control over this town, or maybe yesterday the Ukrainians didn't get this town. But anyway, according to today's information, this town Shandrigalova is still under the Russians' control. If we're talking about the Ukrainians, as we can see, their main goal, first of all, is to prepare, as we discussed yesterday, some buffer zone on the north from between the Russian 20th regular army and the forces located in Liman, on the north of Redkadub and Katerinovka, and with one purpose: to reach the river. So of course they will try to develop their offensive operation towards the river. I'm not sure how fast they're planning to do this, maybe not so fast, but anyway they will try to do this. And but this is not the most important area where the Ukrainians are planning to attack. The most important town where the Ukrainians are targeting is this area, the towns like Ivanovka, Terny, Mirnaya, Yampolovka. So this is their main Ukrainian direction, and in 5 minutes I will explain you why the Ukrainians are planning to get there. Not even to attack Shandrigalova, not even to attack Drobush or Liman, but to get Terny. and this is very important. This is the south of this is the east part from Liman, Yampol, this Kriminaya town. As you can see, the western source map is not updated. If you remember, when this operation started, like a week ago, we discussed this offensive operation near Redka Dub in this area. Also, we discussed offensive operation in Kupiansk and Dvorichne. And you asked me, what would I do if I were an Ukrainian, and how would I develop my counter-offensive operation in this area? And I told you that these two attacks in direction of Redka Dub and Kupiansk is fake attacks. Of course, my opinion was and still is that the Ukrainians need to use these directions just to pin down the Russians, to slow down them, to reduce them as much as possible, not to allow them to be mobile and so on. But I told you that the most important direction which I would use is direction from Serebryanka towards Dibrova. If you remember, I told you that I would develop my offensive operation in this area. Because with help of this, the Ukrainians will be able to encircle Liman, Yampol, this bridgehead, and the most important, to cut the road between Kriminaya and Zarechna. And Kriminaya, as you can see, there is a railroad station. The Russians can use this railroad station to at least to be mobile between, let's say, Lysychansk, let's say this area. Furthermore, they're able to move some forces from Novaya Dar. So this is a very important area. And this road, and the Russians use this road to move some reserves from Rubezhnoye, Severdonetsk, Lysychansk towards Liman in this direction. So I would develop my Ukraine counter-offensive operation in this direction. And the thing is that today we got very interesting update from the Russian sources, and let's take a look at the Russian sources map. And as you can see, the Russian sources map has been updated, and the Ukrainians did exactly as we discussed, as we projected, and now we can say that if we compare the situation with Box, we see that the Ukrainians did two attacks with the left hand in direction of Redka Dub and direction of Kupiansk, was two left-hand attacks, and the third one was from the right hook in direction of Dibrova, and something tells me, and at least a lot of people are saying, that it might be knocked down. But let's follow this situation. If we're talking about the Ukrainians, they're using their regular tactic. First of all, they're mobile troops without armored vehicles, without tanks, just mobile forces with commandos and scouts. And their main idea is to hold their position and to hide in this forest, to move as much force as possible and try to make a mess on the line between Zarechna and Kriminaya. Today, somewhere at noontime, we got first update that Ukrainians developed some recon combats in direction of Tarskoye from this bridgehead and in direction of Yampol from the north. Furthermore, this town like Dibrova is in the gray zone. There are a lot of Ukrainians in this forest. They managed to bridge few pontoon bridges in this area that they're using to move more and more armored vehicles, tanks, and now they're trying to accumulate and move a lot of forces in this forest. If we take a look at the Western sources map, you're going to see that there are a lot of places where the Ukrainians can use these local roads to move in this area, and this very nice position to hide a lot of armored vehicles from drones, from artillery strikes, so it's not very easy to spot and destroy Ukrainian forces in this forest. So anyway, they're moving in this area. There are a lot of them, and according to the Russian sources, one more time, you can see that all these territory, let's update this map according to the Russian sources, all these territories now is under Ukrainian control. All these forests, there are a lot of Ukrainians, a lot of their forces, a lot of mobile groups that are running from one side to another, trying to attack Russian convoys, Russian support and supply lines, trying to do a lot of mess. And I believe that this night or tomorrow in the morning, they will try to engage their tanks, their armored vehicles, and they will try to develop a real bridgehead in this area and to cut finally and entirely the supply and support road between Zarechna and Kriminaya. If we're talking about the Russians today, they reported that this road this road. They're using very specific word for these purposes. They're saying that this road is no longer safe. So this is unsafe pass. I'm not saying that this road is under artillery control, but I believe that this road is under scouts and commandos control, and if they see that the Russians uses some unprotected convoys, they are able to destroy entirely any support in this area. So the situation is very difficult. So as you can see, now the Ukrainians are attacking from two sides, from the north in direction of Redka-Dub, in direction of Shandrigalova, in direction of Terny, and from the south in direction of Zarechno. So now you understand. Now, if we are talking about the Russians and the bridgehead in Liman, Drobushevo area, Novoselovka, Yampol, there is just one safe road left that connects this bridgehead with the mainland, and this is the road. This is our Liman. The Russians can move to the north, then move to Kolodezi, then move a little bit to the west to Ivanovka, and in this area they are able to move to Terny, and after Terny they are able to develop their movement in any direction like Krasnorechsk and so on. So this is the only road that left for the Russians. I'm talking about big road, normal road. I'm not talking about the local roads, because there are a lot of places where the Russians still have possibility to cross this area using fields and so on, but it's not on. The weather is rainy, and I believe sometimes it's not very easy to use like tanks on the fields, at least these days, because from my side, I've already seen a lot of videos where the tanks were stuck on the ground without any possibilities to move further, or at least some armored vehicles, because T-72, of course, there is no problem or barrier for this type of weapon to cross any fields in any weather. But anyway, as you can see, the Ukrainians from the north are moving into this direction, and the same thing the Ukrainians will try to do in the south. First of all, they will try to block Zarechno, in the small village by the name of Torskaya, and after that they will try to, with the help of this collected fist, they will try to move further to the north from this area and to attack the Russians or to block the Russians in this area. So they will try to meet these two armies in the area by the name of Terny. So this is the focal point. This is the heart of Liman defense operation. And the Ukrainians need to do one thing. They need to attack this area from two sides, this small village Terny, from the south and from the north. And with help of this, they will be able to encircle Liman forces. I'm not sure about the number of the Russians in this area, but I believe that there are not less than 2,000-3,000 of soldiers, and they might be encircled. If you ask me about the Russians, I'm not sure what are they doing, because no, I know what are they doing. Today I saw a very interesting report from some general or not higher officer from this bridgehead. He was talking with some press, he was giving an answer, and he was pretty correct, pretty strict. He didn't lie. He told everything as it was. He says he told everything as it is. And first of all, he told that the situation is critical. He told that it's very difficult to be there, that Ukrainians are able to encircle this bridgehead and the forces that locate in this bridgehead. He didn't lie. He told the truth. But after all this like shock truth for the Russians, he told one important thing, and we discussed the thing many times, and I told you about that the losses of Ukrainians in this counter-offensive operation may be higher than all the Ukrainian losses during the Kherson counter-offensive operation, during Kharkiv counter-offensive operation, and maybe during the battle for Lysychansk agglomeration. The Ukrainians are losing so many forces in this counter-offensive operation. They're not counting losses, and his question without an answer, of course, was how long do the Ukrainians able to support such offensive operation? How long? Because I believe, and his words and my opinion as well, that this is their final battle, and this is very important, because if the Russians are able to stand there and to defeat the Ukrainians, it will be a disaster for the Ukrainians, because sooner or later they will have to start counting losses, they will have to show bodies, they will have to I don't know, to do everything they're doing every time after every counteroffensive operation, trying to, when the society and people understand about the real price for this or that. Of course, this might be a very big disaster. If you're talking about the Russians, they don't have a lot of reserves. We discussed that the Russians are able to deploy the reserves not earlier than in November, the 1st November, and that words was also of that officer from this bridgehead, that they're not expecting for some reserves, because it's impossible to deploy these forces that the Russians are doing mobilization. If we're talking about reserves from other front lines, I believe that these front lines also needs these forces, so the situation is very critical. And the only thing that the Russians have in this area is two things: artillery and aircrafts, and they're doing their job well. And this is the only forces that are dealing so much damage to the Ukrainians. Furthermore, we got a lot of updates and reports that the Russians started losing their aircrafts in this area, and not because of the fact that the Ukrainians are very cool with anti-aircraft systems and so on. The thing why the Ukrainians started destroying the Russian aircraft is because they are not even... Sometimes I think that the Russians created some system to bring shells and rockets to the aircrafts on the fly, because sometimes I think that they're not even sitting down on the ground. They're always there, they're always bombing, shelling, and this is the only way, and this is the only key how the Russians can stop this counteroffensive operation, because they don't have reserves, they don't have manpower, and we saw this in this area. The situation is critical, and they just don't have forces, they don't have people to stop this counteroffensive operation. Another Russian military experts are saying that there is another option how to stop the Ukrainians. The Russians don't want to use this option because of many factors, and the most important is about it's illegal, first of all, according to the international law, and the second is that it's like the Ukrainians' way how to do war, but not the Russians. But at least that was their words, what they were trying to show during the previous days. And I'm talking about minings. Of course, the Russians have the same mines that Ukrainians used, let's say, to mine Donetsk. We discussed that many times. Those small mines that don't kill people, but they can cut his leg or his arm. And if we're talking about this forest, or all these forests, is the best solution to use the distant mining method to mine everything, and the Ukrainians won't be able to cross this forest ever, because of it's impossible to do this if this forest is totally mined. But the Russians are not using this tactic, or maybe they will. But if we're talking about the entire collapse of the front line, I believe that they will start doing this, because, or they will lose entire Liman bridgehead, and these forces will be encircled, or they need to start mining. And this another, like we can say, this another thing that the Russians can do with artillery and aircrafts, how to stop the Ukrainians, how to stop this endless wave of, like, I don't know, of endless Ukrainian forces, that reserves that they managed to bring to this bridgehead. If we're talking about other front lines, there are no changes. The Ukrainians are still trying to do some local counter-offensive operation. If we're talking about Bakhmut, Artyomovsk, how the Russians called this town, the Russians are still pushing. The Wagners are still working there, trying to crack this nut. But for now, we see that even if they manage to do something, they manage to take a few square meters, or maybe a few black or trenches, because this area is totally fortified. If we are talking about Konstantinovka, the small town, the Russians reported that as a result of their attack during the previous 24 hours, they attacked the 81st Air Mobile Brigade, and their losses around 150 soldiers. That's a lot, of course. By the way, the Russians are trying to not just to destroy the Ukrainians in this area, also they're changing their focus, trying to destroy the warehouses, ammo depots in this area. They're trying to do everything they can. They try to do everything possible, but I see that sometimes I think that it's not enough to stop the endless Ukrainian wave of Ukrainians in this area. If we're talking about other front lines, no changes. Everybody expects some counteroffensive operation in Zaporozhye area, but this counteroffensive operation hasn't started yet. So let's see what's going to be tomorrow, because today is the final day of referendum, and we can say that according to the facts, this territory is going to become a part of Russia. But if we're talking about the legal side, it will become like a few days later. Some sources are saying that Zelensky doesn't care about these referendums. He is not planning to stop. Even if this territory is going to become a part of Russia, he will continue no matter what and no matter the consequences. Also, some sources are saying that Ukrainians are planning to create some broad nuclear bomb. I don't know how are they going to do this, but anyway, we got these reports that Ukrainians are planning and maybe have already started creation of the broad nuclear bomb. So let's see what can they do in this case. If we are talking about Nikolaev and Zaporozhye, during the attack in Nikolaev, there was some planned industrial zone in this area where the Ukrainians were trying to fix some equipment and so on. As a result of the attack, the Ukrainian lost, to be precise, 59th Motorized Brigade, lost around 50 soldiers and 5 armored vehicles. And the same situation was in Zaporozhye. The Russians attacked this area, and the Ukrainians. There is some national battalion by the name of Gepard, and this national battalion lost around 100 soldiers. Furthermore, the Ukrainian Foreign Legion in this area also had some losses, and they lost around 50 soldiers in this area. And this about Ukraine, but there are two another important topics that I would like to discuss with you today. And the first one, if you remember, yesterday I told you that the president of Belarus visited Russian Federation, and today we got a report that he's still in Russia. He haven't left Russia in direction, but he haven't returned back home. He's still there. I'm not sure. I don't know what are they discussing, trying to solve or something like this. But today, a lot of Telegram channels, a lot of sources were saying, even the Western source map has been updated about that. There is an icon about that the Belarusian authorities now are doing everything necessary in their railroad station, on their railroad services, and this government company, to be ready to receive the big convoys, big supplies from Russian Federation. And the Western sources are saying that Belarus railroad service did the same thing before the 24th of February, when the Russians were moving a lot of forces in this area. So I'm not saying that it might be some kind of fake flag trying to force the Ukrainians to move some forces from the east front line to the north on the border with Belarus. But the thing is that if we're talking about actions, the Belarus authorities are doing the same thing as they did before the 24th of February, and these things are connected and related to the railway station, railroad road, so they're preparing to receive a lot of forces according to the action they do. And of course, another important update, the Western source map hasn't been updated, but if we take a look at the Russian sources map, there is an icon. There is an icon that, as you know, today there was a sabotage operation. At least the Russian sources are saying that was some kind of sabotage operation, and two Nord Streams are shut down, where they would blow in this area, according to the Russian sources. If we're talking about the Russians, they're saying that those blows were done by the Ukrainians, and that at least they are able to provide some evidence about that. Of course, the executors were the Ukrainians. Who was the person or the country who ordered this sabotage operation? I'm not sure we are able to find out ever, but the executors were the Ukrainians. Also the Russians are saying that United Kingdom sold them their submarines, their submarine drones, and many other things. But other Russian sources are saying that operation was prepared and implemented by the Polish special forces or something like this. But anyway, this is a very big problem. and mainly this, according to the Russian source, according to the Russians' opinion of the people who lives in the Russian Federation, this is a very big problem for Germany, of course, because also that today another pipeline between Norway and Poland was opened, and now Poland has a lot of cool things to be very cool and be very powerful in the Europe, and this is a very big problem for Germany. But anyway, the Russians also told that they're not planning to be involved in this investigation, that the Russians are under sanctions. Have nothing to do. They're saying that it is not our problem. We didn't. It wasn't our fault about this destroying something like this. So they want to be like separately about the situation. They want to have like independent investigation about that. But the question is that this explosion was in the neutral waters, and my question from my side: who has power to make investigation in the neutral waters in this area? If the German police forces or something like this has this power, this is good, because I believe that German police forces are able to find out the truth and are able to understand who did this. But if, because of the fact that explosion was in the neutral water, and there is some procedure to hire some investigators in this case, I'm not sure that we will find out ever who did this. So, and that's it for today. Military Summer channel reminds you to condemn any violence in Ukraine. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.